Welcome to QX Church. I'm Pastor Scott Conway, and this is part 2 of our Wedding Vows series. Today we're talking about obeying, forsaking, and faithfulness. So this Wedding Vows series, it has a couple of components. Part of it is as part of my premarital counseling, if you're looking for where the content comes from. And another part, this is good relationship advice generally. And so whether you are married or whether you ever intend to get married, these are things to think about. We're going to talk about a couple of the more interesting concepts to understand as far as at least the way I teach it. And we're going to talk about the vow to obey, the vow to forsake all others, and we're going to talk about faithfulness generally in this lesson. And then we will continue after that into some of the other vows, specifically getting into cleave and what we mean by cleave. Remembering, of course, that have and hold is the physical relationship. So cleave we use in a different way. And we'll get into that next time. So talking about obedience. It's very common in traditional vows that the wife will vow to obey her husband. Now, I've seen this used in some, what in my opinion is rather dysfunctional ways, where basically the man thinks, I'm the man, you have to do what I say, and kind of that attitude. And I've seen relationships where one or the other, sometimes it's the husband, sometimes it's the wife, is treated like an accessory, is treated like an assistant, is treated like your job is to serve me. And I've seen that go both ways. I see it more commonly with men doing it to women than I see it with women doing it to men, but I do see this going in both ways. When a wife makes a vow to her husband to obey, what she's saying is, I trust your leadership. I trust your leadership. Now, statistically speaking, it is certainly true that men tend to be bigger than women. Men tend to be stronger than women. Men tend to out-earn women, especially if a woman is pregnant. There's a possibility that complications relevant to her pregnancy might limit her ability to work. And when a baby is born, disproportionately, it tends to be the mother that's going to stay home. And so in that sense, in a financial basis, the husband ends up having more power. So this question of, can I trust your leadership, becomes a very serious question. Now, even if you're strongly egalitarian, you really believe in the equality of the sexes, sometimes you really just don't know how things like this are going to work. But I knew 2 accountants. Of the 2 accountants, it started off, she was making more money than him because he went to continue his education to a master's degree level. She started working immediately as soon as she had a bachelor's degree. And so she had climbed up a bit and was making more money when he finished his master's. And they had a child. Now, the plan was pretty obvious. I mean, she was going to take some of her maternity leave, and then, once this child's a few weeks old, she's going back to work. Well, once she got in mom mode, once she had this baby, it suddenly occurred to her that she really didn't want to leave this child to be raised by somebody else. And ultimately, in a discussion with her and her husband, the decision was made that she would become a stay-at-home mom. She would become the housewife. And that he would up his income to facilitate her being able to stay home and raise their child, and then later on their children. So even though that wasn't the plan, even though when they got married that wasn't the deal, even though during her own pregnancy that wasn't the deal, at some point that shifted. And so this question of, do I trust your leadership? That if I and our children will be reliant upon you and your decision-making to be able to pay for this roof over our head, to be able to pay for the food on our table, to be able to take care of these things, can I trust your decision-making? Can I trust your leadership of us? Can I trust your leadership of yourself? And so this question of, can I trust your leadership, is much bigger than just, am I willing to have you tell me what to do? I trust your leadership means I'm willing to be on your team. I trust your leadership means I'm willing for you to be team captain. Just like, for men, if you are on a sports team and you have a team captain or a coach or a manager, whoever calls the plays for however your team is structured, depending if it's more formal play, if it's professional play, if it's just friendly play, Do you trust your play caller to be making good decisions for the team? Do you trust whoever's making those decisions, making those calls, to be looking out for whether the team does well, whether the team wins, whether everyone gets to play safely, whether everyone gets to demonstrate good sportsmanship? Do you trust the leadership of your leader? If you're at work, do you trust the leadership of your leaders at work? Your shift supervisors, your managers, the business owners, to be making ethical decisions, to be taking care of the customers, to do what they say they were going to do. That when you pledge yourself to obedience, when you pledge yourself to submit to somebody else's leadership, it's a declaration of trust in their leadership. And so this is a question to ask. Do I trust this person's leadership? Do I feel secure? Do I feel safe? Do I feel it's a wise thing to put myself under this person's leadership? Now, when you accept a vow to obey, when you accept someone submitting to your leadership, it means I accept this responsibility. I accept the responsibility to making good team decisions. I accept the responsibility to be thinking about the team, to be thinking about the team values, to be thinking about the team goals. That I accept the responsibility to not just be looking out for what I want, but to equally be looking out for you want, for what you want, for what we need, for what our children need, for what the whole team needs, for the totality of all of the variables that a good leader ought to be thinking about. I accept this responsibility. When you combine these, both sides should be a little bit intimidating. Both sides should require some rather sober consideration. The vow of obey is derived from the concept of a wife submitting to her husband, which we find in Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. And there's a little bit more unpacking in there, but for the sake of speed, we'll just leave it right there. And I've listened to some men quote this and say, "Yeah, you have to submit to me, woman." And if that's kind of the power structure he's trying to create, there's an issue with that. Commonly referenced with 5:22 is the 5:25 admonition for husbands to love. Ephesians 5:25 says, "Husbands, love your wives as Christ loves the church and gave himself for her." A lot of people, quite rightly, are quick to point out that if a husband is loving his wife as Christ loved the church and gave himself for her, that it's much easier to submit to that kind of leadership. That the more Christ-like the husband is, the more like Jesus he leads, the easier it is to submit to that kind of leadership. There's something else in here that often gets overlooked. Ephesians 5:21. This is just before the 5:22 and 5:23 admonitions. It uses the exact same Greek word for submit. It says, "Submit yourselves one to another in the fear of God." Submit yourselves one to another. And in fear of God means, respecting your Creator, respecting your God, respecting the Creator of the heavens and the earth. So whatever we mean by submit, when we're talking about wives submitting to their husbands, is also what we mean by submit one to another. So in some way, shape, or form, when you and I, just as peers, submit one to another, that is the exact same word for wives submit to your husband. So it can't be me boss, you slave. It can't be that. Because me being the man of the house means you submit to me and I get my own way. Then what does submit one to another mean? I get my own way and you get your own way? How does that work? And so in some way, shape, or form, these are the same submissions. That they have to work together. Both submits have to work together. And so one of the ways that we look at that is the basic idea that you submit to one another in each other's area of authority. You submit to one another in each other's area of expertise. You submit to one another based upon your roles. You submit to one another based upon your goals. Somebody is going to be taking the lead. Somebody's going to be on point. Somebody is going to be calling the shots. Someone's going to be making the suggestions. Someone's going to be facilitating a group discussion. Someone's going to be in a leadership position. Now, we tend sometimes to think of leadership like a boss, the person who gets to dictate what happens. But when you have a committee of leaders, there's no power struggle. People aren't fighting over, well, who gets to decide? What they're focused on is how do we get things done? Now, if I have a team of 10 bosses, there's going to be power struggles. There's going to be people fighting for position, fighting for the right to call the shots. If I have a group of 10 leaders, and they're leaders, not bosses, no one's going to be fighting over power. They're just going to be working together to get the thing done, because that's how leaders do it. The admonition of the husband to be the head of the household is a responsibility placed upon him by general biblical principle. That as Christ is head of the church, the husband's supposed to be the head of the house. But that's the model again. Christ. Once again, Jesus Christ serves as the role model. And that if the husband will head up his household, head up his family, in the same way that Jesus heads up the church, then he's doing it right. But here gets to be the interesting thing. The wife is also an equal partner, and there may be times where the husband submits to the wife too. They submit one to another. There may be times where the wife is the one who knows what to do. The wife is the one who has the information. The wife is the one who, this is her domain. This is her area of expertise. This is what she knows. And he will submit to her. Now, a husband submitting to his wife doesn't necessarily mean now she's the boss. Now, if it goes either way all the time, or one or the other is bossing the other around, that gets to be an issue. But when leaders are in partnership with leaders, and you recognize, okay, so your job is to be the senior leader, my job is to be the junior leader, but we're both leaders. It's submission to a peer. Neither one of us is more than the other. Neither one of us is less than the other. Neither one of us is necessarily smarter than the other, or anything else. But at some point, if there is an impasse, if there's something we just don't agree on, there's got to be a way to make the decision. So there's an obligation also on the part of the husband to model the submission he expects. Because if it's submit one to another, followed immediately by, and wives submit to your husbands. So the general principle is wives to your husbands in a marriage, right next to, with, same time as a generic submit one to another. So somehow these go together. And so that means that the husband will have ample opportunity to model for his wife the submission that he would like to see from her, when maybe it's her area of expertise, and she gets to see how he submits to her expertise as a model for her submitting to his leadership. That he will get to model as he does to submit one to another with people at church, people at work, to his boss, as a model for the submission that he is hoping for, that he is expecting, that he is demonstrating he is willing to show her, and how he submits to his own leaders. Now this can be a little scary. Because if I come home where I've submitted to the authority of my boss, I took the job. When I take the job, I'm submitting to my boss's leadership because I want the paycheck. Now if that's my only motive, if I come home and I am griping and complaining about my boss, might I be modeling to my wife that this is the submission you can do to me? You can gripe and you can complain about me. And then might that also then be the submission that we're modeling for our children, when our children need to submit to the parental leadership, and they see that we reserve the right to ignore our leaders, to gripe about our leaders, that we're constantly complaining about our leaders, and then we model for them and how they can do that with us as the parents. So this whole thing of leadership, creating a model of submission, a model of how leaders submit to leaders, a model of how leaders work to get things done, And the husband is modeling it for his wife and to his wife. The wife is modeling it generally to the husband. And so the kids get to see how leaders work together. Now the model that we use, the metaphor, is captain and commander. Now it's a metaphor, so don't go too far with it. Don't dive into Navy regulations or merchant marine regulations. So given that, the idea of the captain and commander is the husband is the captain of the ship, and the wife is the commander of the ship. The captain chooses his commander. And so the idea here is that the commander is your first officer. The commander is your senior officer. The commander is the one who's going to run the show when you're not around. The commander is someone whose independent decisions you have to trust and count on, because if it's something going on and you're not there, they have to be able to handle it. And you have to trust the decisions they make aren't going to be contrary to the decisions you would make. And so when you pick your commander, you're picking someone who will be a supplement to you. Now, you may pick someone who has a different skill set. You may pick someone who kind of expands the team identity. You might have an expertise here. You pick a commander who has an expertise there. Likewise, it goes the other way around. The commander chooses her captain, because there's nothing that says that when a man proposes to a woman that she is obligated to accept. And so there's a mutuality here, that she gets to decide, do I trust you as my leader? She gets to decide, am I willing to serve on this ship, this family, this couple that will be us, and eventually this family that will be us, or if one of them already has children, am I willing to serve on the ship that is this family that we are instantly creating to move forward in life? And that's a question that both the captain and commander are asking when they're deciding to create this partnership. The selection is a lookout for not just them as a couple, but for what may become a family, what may raise children together, a partnership that could be the model for and the leaders of children. Each has to believe that the other is looking out for the team. Now, here's some powers of the commander. The commander may refuse, belay, countermand, and remove. Refuse, belay, countermand, and remove. Now, of course, captains can delegate to commanders at whatever level they choose, and they may remove commanders from duty. That you can take someone and, basically confine them to quarters would be the shipboard thing. But what you're doing is you're taking them out of their position and you're saying, no, you don't get to be in command right now. Could be that you're emotionally compromised, you're not making good decisions right now, I can't let you call the shots because you're not making good decisions. So most people recognize, the captain has that authority. If the captain decides that someone's really not doing a good job, that you can take them off of that job, at least until they're prepared to do a better job. But sometimes overlooked is the commanders, the power of the commander, that the commander may refuse to obey an order. That it could come down to something and the captain issues an instruction and there's not a consensus and the commander thinks it's a bad idea. The commander can make an individual judgment call. Now, I had a Christian woman. The husband decided to change churches. She didn't want to change churches. But what she says, which church we go to, isn't a very critical issue. And I am under authority. He is my captain. I am the commander. And there isn't a compelling reason why not to follow his lead. I don't want to. I like the people at the church, but really there's nothing stopping me from continuing my relationship with these people. So, being under authority, I will go to the new church. And then she built a new church home environment and made new friends in the new church because she took herself as under authority. Now, on the other hand, if he was making a decision that, no, this is a bad decision. This is a bad decision. This isn't just one I don't like. It's a bad one. I believe it's bad. He thinks it's good. That's why he's making the call. She could simply refuse and state her case. And I was talking to another wife, and the husband wanted to do something. The wife thought, no, that's wrong. That is wrong. Now, the husband was doing it to try to make peace in the business organization. And the wife saw it as, you're rewarding bad behavior. I refuse to comply with that order because I see it as rewarding bad behavior. And she made her case. She refused to go along with it. And in that case, her husband heard her out and he agreed. And so he didn't move forward with his plan. A commander may belay an order. That means stopping other people from obeying an order. So if the commander or the captain give an order, either one of them can belay that order. Either one of them can say, don't obey that order. If either one of them tells one of their kids to do something, the other one can tell the kid, no, don't do that. That's belaying an order. And again, that's the similar thing. If something is in the realm of an okay decision, maybe you don't like it, maybe it's not the decision you would make, maybe it's not the way you would prefer, but every once in a while there might be something coming up that you think is just wrong. And if it's at that level, you can belay an order. They may countermand an order, which means giving a different order in its place. Pardon me. And so that's more than just, I won't do it. It's more than just, no, don't do that. It's saying, no, don't do that, do this instead. And commanders must also accept this responsibility as well. Sorry, I skipped a part. A commander may remove a captain from command. A commander can basically say, just as a captain can, that I don't think the other person is making good leadership decisions right now. Now, sometimes this happens because someone is emotionally compromised. That's the line we saw in the Star Trek movie. Because there's something going on. And when there's something going on, sometimes you get in this odd position. And maybe you're not making very good decisions. Pardon me. Oh, my goodness. And so when that's happening, you may remove a captain from command, just as a captain may remove a commander from command if one or the other thinks the other one isn't being clear-headed about this. The other one's not making rational decisions. The other one is making more emotional, more selfish decisions. You have like standing things. If someone's been drinking, no, don't do what Dad says when he's been drinking. That come run it by Mom. And a sober dad would probably agree, but drunk dad may not. Same thing the other way around. If Mom's the one that's drunk, or both of them are drunk. So commanders must accept the responsibility. Commanders must accept their responsibility to make those judgment calls. Both sides accept the responsibility to consider, when would I disobey? Both must consider their responsibility to belay orders, their responsibility to countermand orders, their responsibility to take the other one out of command, even if it's just for a short time. That this is not just a power, it is a responsibility to help protect the integrity of the team. Captains must be aware of the rights they give their commander. And so husbands must be aware that this is a right they give their wives and that they are trusting their wives to take responsibility to use this power well. Now, if all this is understood, then I think the vow may include a vow to obey. If all of this is understood, I'm comfortable with the wife vowing to obey her husband, with this understanding that it's not him boss, her slave. That there's a mutuality to it. It's a submission of one peer to another peer, of one leader to another leader, and is accepting responsibility to watch and observe your leadership and make my independent judgment calls as to whether we're going to continue to follow this leadership. I get very concerned when I have a bride-to-be, or for that matter, a wife in general, that has a serious problem with obeying. Now, part of it could be that her own experience and observation is that, well, him boss, me servant. But with this understanding, if a woman has a problem making the vow to obey her husband, what she's saying is, I don't trust his leadership. I'm not willing to submit to his leadership. I don't trust that he's going to be making decisions for the team. And if that's the case, my suggestion is you really need to take a look at this relationship and consider if you really want it to be a marriage. Because if you're not married yet and you don't trust this person's leadership, it might be a better idea to not marry someone whose leadership you don't trust. If you don't trust that you can submit to any decisions that this guy makes, and you don't trust that he's making decent decisions generally, do you really want to be living with someone who might be bigger than you, stronger than you, more dangerous than you, if you really don't trust him? And so that's something to consider as well. So that's the vow to obey. Now, there's another vow that we tend to make. The vow to forsake. To forsake all others. Now, having and holding is what we call the physical relationship. The having is the sexual and sex, and the holding is the romantic, the affectionate. And so when you get down to forsake all others and to cleave to you alone, now we're talking leave, cleave, be one flesh. So the idea here in forsake is my partner will be my primary relationship. So the forsaking all others, we tend to think of it as, I won't have sex with someone other than you. But this idea of my partner will be my primary relationship. My partner will be number one. My husband will be my number one. My wife will be my number one. Our metaphor here is a throne room. So try to think of a throne room with a dais, and the top platform holds the thrones. So there's a king and a queen throne side by side at the very top of the platform. And then there's several steps down to the main hall. So try to imagine a massive throne room, and these steps are like lower platforms, and then there's the main hall. The idea here is that only the king and the queen sit in those thrones. If you put someone else on the throne, if you let someone else take leadership over your spouse in your life, because we just talked about obey, this is, you can tell it's related to obey, and the king and the queen aren't in submission one to another, with the queen in general submission to the king, and the king and queen jointly in submission to one another in each area's domains and areas of expertise, that someone else is calling the shots, someone else is in charge, the king and the queen aren't in submission to one another, one or the other is in submission to some other outside authority, then this gets to be a problem. Now, others may be top step, a level down from the throne, but they don't get to sit in the throne. They don't become the king. They don't become the queen. Each person has places they are allowed, and each person has places they are not allowed. What primary relationship means is that the partnership is first. That the husband and wife are a team. The two have become one. They are one team, one entity. The primary relationship, they're first in each other's lives because they are building this team. An obvious thing here is to always prioritize your partner. I mean, that would seem somewhat obvious. Now, there may be competing responsibilities. There may be competing have-tos, competing musts. But the partner is always really high up on the priority list, even when there's direct competition. That you're not putting other people as emotionally more important and philosophically more significant to you than your partner. It's harder to remember to do this when you have children, because in our society, Western society, the United States in particular, 21st century, it seems that we have this natural bent that once there are kids, there's this sudden vertical focus and we lose the horizontal focus. Often the husband-wife relationship ends up giving way to parenting, and parenting takes over. And the husband and wife cease to conduct themselves as husband and wife. They stop conducting themselves as partners, and they start to conduct themselves as parent and assistant parent. It's important to maintain the partnership So the partnership parents, that you maintain that horizontal relationship, the teamwork between husband and wife, and the horizontal team parents the vertical team, the parent to the child. It's important to maintain that partnership because the partnership should be parenting, not just the mom, not just the dad. The marriage partnership should be top priority. Now, subject, of course, to healthy application of good principles, because when you have competing responsibilities, when it's a work-related thing, sometimes the work has to take precedent because it's part of a have to. It's part of the deal for the roles that exist. If there's a radical difference in priorities, if I'm sitting around and my wife wants to do something and someone else wants to do something else, and it really doesn't matter one way or the other, I go with my wife. Now, if my mom's in the hospital and my wife wants to watch a show on Netflix with me, well, I'm not heading to the hospital because that's of vastly more important priority than hanging out and watching a show you could watch at any particular time in the future. And so if there's a big mismatch in values, a big mismatch in priorities, that's something to be discussed. That's something to be worked on. So the primary relationship doesn't make your partner your God. It doesn't make your partner the head deity of your pantheon, that they get to dictate to you, because we're back to that partnership thing. We're back to the leaders submitting to leaders working together. But it does mean that this is the primary relationship. All things being equal, you go with your partner. It doesn't mean you're going to back your partner in doing something wrong. It doesn't mean you're going to back your partner doing something bad. I've seen situations where the husband in this particular case was just dead wrong. And he insisted that his wife back him up. But she knew he was wrong. But he got mad at her for not backing him up when she thought he was just dead wrong. Now, she didn't think it was a big enough deal that she's going to fight with him about it publicly. But he thought it was a big enough deal that he was willing to fight over it because she refused to back him up when what she thought he was doing was wrong. That's not what we're talking about. It's not that level of primacy. As all things being equal, your partner always comes first. All things being unequal, your partner always has a priority and high value. Even when in the moment, your partner might not be able to be that priority in the moment. In another example, so it doesn't seem like I'm just picking on husbands, there was a wife, got very upset that her husband wouldn't come home and help her. That he didn't understand that I need his help at home. We're having challenges with our child. We got this other stuff. He needs to come take care of this because he needs to be the man of the house. But he was at work. He had responsibilities to fulfill at his job. And the family was in a financial crunch. The family needed the money. So even if he could suddenly take half a day off of work and just go home and handle whatever it was, which wasn't an emergency, it was an emotional urgency for her. But it wasn't something that couldn't wait another 5 hours. That if he loses a half a day of work, then that's another half day of pay. They're going to be behind on their bills. And he's trying to keep them as caught up as possible right now during this crunch time. But he wanted him to make the money and to be home on demand. And to her, that was being her husband. Because, we're supposed to be first. He cares more about work than he cares about us. That's not what we're talking about. He has responsibilities, and he made the call to stay at work. Why? Because he's taking care of the family. Because that financial responsibility he was bearing alone at that time was a responsibility to take care of the family, and he made the call. Now, primary relationship means the partnership decides. The partnership decides. Now, the partnership won't always be able to decide, but the partnership should decide. The needs to be discussed, or this needs to be discussed, so the partners, as partners, can make as many of the decisions as possible. They can make decisions about pre-existing relationships. We're talking about, okay, what is forsaking relationship, forsaking all others going to look like for the existing relationships? and how the partnership will deal with those relationships. Those relationships with work, with your bosses and co-workers and other friendships. I mean, some of these are pretty clear. Obviously, if there's other romantic dalliances, those will probably be a topic. But here's another one that gets to be particularly important. If it is a marriage bringing in children from previous relationships, how will the partnership deal with the children? Does the mother deal with her kids, the father deal with his kids? Will the partnership work together? Will each other have authority in each other's lives? Is a stepfather going to be a father, a stepmother going to be a mother? What is that going to look like? Because it's different than being the bio parent with all of the legal rights, that it's derivative rights from the bio parent. What's that going to look like? It may include extended family. Depending upon your culture, extended family has different levels of primacy. And so in some cultures, some family members say they always have a say in your marriage. And if you're going to do forsaking all others, what is that going to look like in a subcultural group where the extended family is part of the family? Where the extended family expects to have some say in the household? Where your aunt, your mother, your grandmother expects to show up and be able to comment on things going on around the house and comment on your marriage and comment on your choices. How is the partnership going to deal with that? Now, if you come from a nuclear family culture, then that's not much of an issue. Because in a nuclear family culture, what that basically means is the husband and wife decide for their own household, and no one else has a say. If you want to offer your opinion, fine. If you want to offer your advice, fine. But really, honestly, we're going to make all the calls. And if we want to go to a thing, we'll go to a thing. If we don't want to go to a thing, we won't go to a thing. Because it's the husband, wife, and their kids is really all that matters. But some cultures go, yeah, but, then the parents matter, because they're the grandparents and the extended family and the aunts and the uncles and the cousins. All of them matter. And you have to figure out if your primary relationship is primary, what does that mean for those? So going on the metaphor of the king and the queen on their throne. If you're in a nuclear family culture, chances are there's going to be the king and the queen on the throne. If you're building it this way, king and queen on the throne, and then your princess and princesses next step down. Or at least they have their own little thrones, but they're subject to the king and the queen. And in a nuclear family, then that might be it. I mean, you might be several steps down before anyone else has any authority or say, any advisor capacity. But if you come from an extended family culture where the whole extended family matters, that everyone in the family gets a say, well, it might be, if you practice it this way, the king and the queen and the princes and princesses, and the extended family, the parents are just one step down. That they have a lot of authority. They have a lot of power to show up. You can talk to them at different levels and expect more from them and have more expected from you in return. And decide, though, are you going to offer them the throne? What if your dad shows up and says, look, I'm the patriarch of this family. You're going to do what I'm telling you. Well, now all of a sudden he's taken over the king's throne. And the king's not calling the shot. The queen's not calling the shot. The king's father is calling the shots. And is that the way you want your household to run? Because now the primary relationship is him, not the husband. It's the husband's father becomes primary in the household. So you have to decide how you're going to handle this. And depending upon your culture, this might require different levels of conversation, especially if you have a very domineering parent who thinks he or she can just show up in your home and tell you what to do. And may even put a religious veneer on, well, you're supposed to obey your mother and your father, which isn't what honor your mother and father means, but that is sometimes the way it gets talked about, which no. It may include the role of parents, the role of in-laws, and what role they'll play in the marriage, and including if they're going to live with you. Because you might share a house together. It might be a practical matter for expenses. You might be living in their home. What does that mean when it's their home? What does it mean if they move in with you? Are you going to take in like your elderly parents? And what does that mean for the relationship? If you have the husband and wife and it's the husband and wife's home, but parents are parents, and sometimes they have trouble not operating out of that parent role. And it's even more of a challenge if you have a husband and a wife, but you're living in one of the family homes. So they own it. And so what does that mean? Now where they're your landlord as well as your parent. So all of these things can be discussed. All of these things can be worked out. You can talk about how longtime friends will interact. You can do all of these things, make partnership decisions. The partnership gets to decide. And some of the things you have to keep in mind on stuff like this is, what is people's habits been? What does the relationship already look like? So there was one particular young man, the relationship was moving forward. One of the things he really liked about this lady is that she was really physically affectionate. Because, he craved a lot of physical affection, so he loved this about her. That she was just one of those huggy, kissy, and you could sit down, you could walk and hold her hand, you could sit down and snuggle and cuddle while you're watching television, and just lots of touching going on, and that was great. But then here was one of his challenges. That's just who she was. So what does that mean is with her brothers, her sisters, her parents, her friends, her extended family, she was also very huggy, kissy. Well, he didn't like it so much when it was them. He liked her being her when it was with him, but he didn't like her being her when it was with them. But in his case, asking her to stop being like that, when that's just who she was, in fact, that's part of what got his attention in the first place, is that she was very openly affectionate with him when they had no romantic relationship, because that's just who she is. To ask her to stop having the kind of relationship she's always had with people would be a denial of how she operates with people. And I've seen places where people say, well, you can't talk to them. You can't have an ex on your social media page. If this person clicks like, I don't care if you dated them 20 years ago, that's cheating. And sometimes it really gets out of hand. So you have to make some decisions on this and have to have the discussion on this. Some things may seem obvious, and if they may be obvious, but maybe not. Just a couple of sentences might be the entire discussion. You might just, I assume that there's not a problem having my ex get in periodic contact with me. So, well, why would that happen? Okay, well, that means we have to have a discussion. And so in my case, I have contact with exes, ex-girlfriends going all the way back to high school and college years. And, and sometimes they'll contact me, sometimes I contact them. Sometimes it's, just maintaining a connection. I had one of my old girlfriends from high school contacted me to come do her wedding. Another old lady friend from high school contacted me to come do her wedding. And so sometimes it has nothing to do with creating any kind of a relationship or potential romance. I mean, I'm helping facilitate the romance that they have. But I also have other friendships with ex-girlfriends that I've maintained for 20 years, 30 years even. And is that going to be an issue? And what are the lines on that? What makes someone feel like it's a potential threat? And we'll get to more of that when we talk about faithfulness. So the question to be asking is, who is hurting and who is helping? Who is hurting and who is helping? Connecting more deeply with people who help your marriage is important. If you can connect with people who help your marriage, it will help your marriage. Getting appropriate distance from people who hurt your marriage is also important. Sometimes good friends, sometimes family members hurt your marriage. Now, for my generation, we remember there was a show called Bewitched where the wife's mother, Samantha's mother, really, really disliked the husband. And so whenever this woman's around, that's creating an issue. And so if you're constantly around someone, even if you have a good reason to be around them because they're the parent, but they're doing damage to your marriage. Somewhere in there you have to figure out, how are we going to recraft this relationship so that we eliminate or minimize the damage. We don't necessarily have to eliminate the entire relationship, but we do need to do something to eliminate or minimize the damage this relationship does. So if friends, family, or professionals help, we'll have more of that. If they hurt, have less of it. Recraft it, engineer it in some creative way. One key to keep in mind is whether or not you yourself are hurting or helping your own marriage. Because generally speaking, Outside threats aren't threats unless there's a problem going on inside. Inside of one, inside the other, or as between the two. And affairs in particular are a tricky and sensitive subject, and it's difficult to get into something like that in as open a forum as a public talk. But one key thing to consider is what does and does not constitute an affair. What does and does not constitute an affair. For some people, it's just a sexual relationship outside of marriage, and if you're not having sex, it's not an affair. But some people have very different definitions. I've heard talk of something called an affair of the heart. And all an affair of the heart means is there's an attraction, there's a desire, and there might be another relationship, and that at least at an emotional level, the other relationship is in some way in the general realm of where the romance is in the marriage. Or if the romance in the marriage has kaputted, it might be the primary source of romance. Is that an affair? And I had this conversation one time because I was accused of having an affair with a woman I wasn't having an affair with. But then the affair story turned to, it's an affair of the heart. Oh, okay, so now I see more what you're talking about. So now you're not talking about an affair, you're talking an affair of the heart. And so my next question is, so what is that? Exactly, what is that? And when I was talking to the woman in particular, and she said, well, it just means that I have a love and an attraction for you that is at a level with my husband would have a problem with it. It's like, okay. So basically what you're saying is that you love me, you're attracted to me, and you have desire for me. But we're not pursuing anything. In fact, we actively have lines that we use to guard against that. So here's my question. Is that a problem? And she kind of said, well, what? Well, why wouldn't that be a problem? And it's like, well, with me and my relationships, certainly just as a man in general, you may notice that men tend to notice attractive women. And a lot of men, when they notice an attractive woman, they're attracted to that woman. Now, men tending to be often more visually stimulated and having fewer requirements to be sexually attracted to someone might have some desire for that woman just based on what she looks like. Does that mean he doesn't love his wife if he notices some other woman is physically attractive? Of course not. And then likewise, okay, so if you have an emotional attraction, but you're well guarded against anything going wrong in that relationship, and that relationship is supporting your marriage, is that a problem? And as she thought about it, she thought, well, maybe not. Maybe I should talk to my husband. And they actually had the discussion, and he said, well, you know, so long as you guys aren't, like, pursuing anything and he's not pulling you away from me, honestly, I don't really have a problem. I may not want to see it, but I don't have a problem with it. Every time you come home to me after you've seen him, you're a great wife. Like, now some of your girlfriends, on the other hand. Because what had happened is she would go to brunch with her girlfriends, so old ladies, you know, no romantic threat to the men. But what these women would do is they would get together at brunch and they would gripe about their husbands. And by the time they were done, one time this particular wife was on her way home, and she was so mad at her husband. How dare he? And as she's driving home, she said, well, wait a second, why am I upset with my husband? He was doing this before I went to brunch. And I wasn't bothered by it in the least. I thought, well, you know, that's just him being him. And now I'm mad about it. Why am I mad about it? Because some of the ladies at brunch were mad about their husbands doing similar things. And when I shared that, well, my husband does that, we all kind of jumped on him. And now I'm mad at my husband. He didn't do anything different. So I leave home in the morning, and we're good. I come home from brunch with my girlfriends, and now he's in trouble with me. And what she realized is, okay, so when I go see Pastor Scott, when I go see Scott, and I come home to my husband, he helps ground me on, you know, what's normal for a man, and helps ground me in how my husband loves me and how I love my husband. I go home ready to be his wife. I go home filled and ready to operate in the role of wife, as his primary relationship with him is my primary relationship. I go to brunch with these ladies, I come home, he's in trouble. I come home disconnected from him. I come home more as an opponent than a partner. So she decided to maintain her friendship with me and to end her brunch dates with the ladies, with her husband's support. So you have to make a distinction between which relationships are helping and which ones are hurting. Which ones are competition, which ones are helping. Now here's something you can keep in mind. We can distinguish between a relationship that distracts from or a relationship that takes away from the primary relationship without calling it an affair. Somehow we get fixated on this, I have to call it cheating so that way I feel justified in saying you can't do it. So as soon as you don't want me to see an email, that's cheating. As soon as you don't want me to see a text, that's cheating. As soon as you don't want me sitting in the room while you're on the phone with someone, that's cheating. And as soon as you don't want to give me your passwords, that's cheating. And we tend to want to lump everything into the cheating category so that we can feel self-justified in arguing with it. But you can say that, I think that's a distraction from, I think that's taking away from, I think that's diminishing the primary relationship without calling it cheating, because there's plenty of things that can do that. Even hobbyists can do that. And so if you can make that distinction, then you can be much more judicious about what you're going to call rising to the level of an affair. Now, we may also want to consider lines of jealousy, possessiveness, territorialness. Now, what jealousy is insecurity. Now, just because I feel jealous doesn't mean you have to change. Because if I feel insecure, but there's really no call for the insecurity, that's my problem. And so if someone gets in relationship with a really insecure person, they can get jealous over all sorts of things, over the silliest things. And they can just blow up about these things. And if I'm going to get a text from work, or I'm going to be on the phone with the boss, and I know that this lady she's just going to lose it, because she just loses it. I'm going to hide those texts and hide those phone calls from her, especially when I'm on the phone with my boss, because I don't want my boss listening to her rant. Who are you talking to? Why are you talking to this person? Where are you going? Don't tell me that. I don't want that. And so I may make a judgment call. So just because someone is hiding stuff doesn't necessarily mean they think what they're doing is wrong, but they think that what they're doing is going to elicit a reaction. And if I understand that my jealousy means I feel insecure, then the first thing I should do is I look at, why do I feel insecure about this? Does this require anything of this other person? Because a lot of times, it's just my own issue. A lot of times, it's just my own problem. I just need to deal with it. So I might feel, insecure if my wife is going to see someone who at one time was interested in her, and now he's a multi-millionaire, and we're going through a financial crunch right now. And that makes me kind of feel insecure, because I might be thinking, she was married to this guy, she wouldn't be having these financial problems because, he's worth $25 million, and we don't know if we're going to file bankruptcy next year or not. And that might make me feel insecure. Does that mean that my wife shouldn't go see this person? That she shouldn't go to the birthday party or go to the high school reunion? Of course not. That I have reasons for insecurity. It have nothing to do with that relationship. It may be in part triggered by that relationship, but it's just a reminder to me that, I feel genuinely insecure about this financial crunch. And the fact that there's a contrast with somebody else is just what's stirring up the insecurity in me. And so I need to look at that. Now, if the reason I feel insecure is I really think my wife would leave me for this other person, I really think that this relationship is a threat to my marriage, well then that's cause to be insecure. And so then I approach that differently, because then I feel there's a threat to the relationship. Now here's a big part of it. Is that a threat to the relationship because I'm being a bad husband? Is that a threat to the relationship because I'm being a bad husband? The first thing I may need to do when I feel insecure in a relationship is I step up my performance in the relationship. I upgrade my performance as a husband. that I have access to my wife nobody else has. I have time with my wife that nobody else, and of course the same thing goes the other way. If I'm a wife has access to her husband nobody else has. Each partner has knowledge of what the other one likes, the subtleties and the nuances, at least if you're building intimacy, if you're building connection. That you have access, you have knowledge, you have insight, you have the ability to build something so amazing as bulletproof. You could. And if you feel insecure, one of the first things to look at is does anything need to change? Because it might have nothing to do with the relationship. And does it have something to do with the relationship? Do I need to upgrade? And then finally, does it have to do with the other person doing something badly? And then that's a discussion. Possessiveness, treating someone like a possession, means I control you. I tell you what you can and can't do. I tell you who you can see. I tell you what your rules are. Territorialness is I keep others away from you. So if I'm going to be possessive of you, I tell you, you don't go see him. If I'm going to be territorial, I tell him, you stay away from my wife. Both of them are like property things. You don't trespass on my property, or you are my property, I control you. Partnerships, leaders communicating with leaders is, this is a decision I would like you to make. That is up to you. It's up to you to draw your line. This is what I see, this is how I feel. It's up to you to decide. Now, you might decide how I feel is more important. You might decide how I feel isn't as important. You might decide that how I feel has a basis in reality or doesn't have a basis in reality. You may acknowledge how I feel, still go see that, but also in some way compensate. Do some extra stuff. And so say, for instance, if part of the concern is, you're going to be more attracted to him than you are to me. Well, if we have like an intimate date time and a nice ending to our evening, and that goes before and or after seeing an old friend, well, that might go a long way to make me feel a lot more secure that you want me, and you want to be with me, and that you're committed to me. And then in the middle of all of these finances, that we have the discussion about our relationship, about our commitment, about our partnership, so that I can feel at least intellectually anchored, if not emotionally anchored. We're good. He's no threat to us. He's an old friend you haven't seen for years at a high school reunion event. I don't know any of those people. I didn't really want to go. If I feel at all insecure, I could go. And if you invite me to join you, or it's okay with you if I join you, and then just that way, I can be better. But I might decide that I don't want to see him. I mean, if I'm actually sitting here and I see this guy pull up in his Bentley, and I get like, man, I might be better off just staying away from that if I'm already feeling insecure just with the generic knowledge that this guy is rich. And so, just things to kind of keep in mind over how you navigate these things. So here's a principle on faithfulness. Being faithful is in your marriage and with others. In your marriage. Now, we started this concept last time, and we've unpacked it already a lot more here. If I'm married, so suppose I have a wife, and my wife has a relationship with some other guy, maybe at work, that if I watch the way they interact, if I read the text, if I read the emails, if I heard the banter back and forth, I might not like it, I might not approve of it, I might not certainly want it going on in front of me. But what if I never know? How much damage does it do to me if really, honestly, I never know? Certainly at the moment it's happening, unless I'm on a video chat with her or I'm talking on the phone with her, I don't even know what's happening. But, now this is why I bring this up this way. But I will always know what she does with me. I will always know what she's not doing with me. Why? Because it's with me. And so whether or not something is going on when I'm not around, I may know, I may not know. I might suspect, I might guess, I might be completely oblivious. In any event, it's not happening to me. But whatever she does with me is with me. Whatever she does to me is to me. That I'm not going to miss those. And so she's having playful banter because that's just who she is. She's just playfully flirtatious with everybody. You know, I'm not seeing most of it, but I'm always seeing if she's doing it with me. If she gets into these kind of like little biting, bickering things with other people at work, with customers, with whatever, I'm not seeing it. I'm not living with that, but I'm always living with it if she does it with me. And so whatever is going on outside, if it becomes an issue in our marriage, that there's a multiple step thing. That it happens, and then somehow I have to find out about it. And I may know all of it, I may know none of it, I may know something in between, but I will always know what's going on with us. I will always know what we are doing, how she behaves toward me, how I behave toward, because it's always happening as between us. So hopefully with that, it becomes clear that this part between us has to be part of that faithfulness equation. This is a big part of why being faithful means more than just, or means more how you treat your partner, because all of it is with your partner. There's always obvious. Because it's with me. It's with you. You're experiencing it in real time when it's happening. The other stuff is secondary. But unless you happen to walk in on something, you don't get it in real time. You may find out about it later. You may be completely wrong. That I have a husband, I have some confidence, is telling the truth on this, that he and his wife had talked about office sex. And so he thought, well, just in case that comes up, let me make sure I have some condoms at the office. And she found the condoms at the office, and her assumption was he was having an affair, multiple affairs at the office with other women. Now, I believe him when he tells me that he wasn't, but she's convinced that he was. Now, he also knows once she's decided, there's no talking to her. Because if he was, she would expect him to lie about it. So that gets to be a problem. So if I deny it, she's even more sure it is. If I don't say anything about it, she's still sure that it is, and then it's basically stuck. So really all he did is he just said one time, it's like I have those for us because we had the discussion. And she didn't believe him. Well, he decided that he was just going to drop it because he knows that further denials and protestations are just going to be more evidence for her. Because of course he's going to deny it. And so he recognized he was stuck and said all it's going to do is end up picking more fights. And he just wasn't going to do it. But on her side, what is she experiencing? She is experiencing being cheated on. It's not even real. But that's where her emotion is. I can't prove it, but I know it. And a lot of times that's what happens on the secondary basis. Now, certainly what they know is how he treats her and how she treats him. And certainly one of his issues is like, well, what do I do with something like that? I mean, talking to her. Because suppose I am having an affair, you would expect me to lie. If I'm not having an affair, I really do have them for you and I. And you don't believe me, well, there's nothing I can do about whether you believe me or not. Had you counted the condoms, you would have seen the number of condoms I have never changed. Because we never had sex at the office. But you just saw them and assumed. So I don't really know what to do with that. And that's kind of just where that's at. And in his particular case, you know, he didn't usually give out passwords, but he always left his social media open and his email open. His phone never had a lock on it. So anytime she wanted, I mean, she had open for me. You can pick up my phone. You can take a look at the text. You can take a look at my computer and see who I'm messaging and what we're talking about, what's being posted, what's public, what's private. And you can see all of that. Part of the rule was now you don't post anything as me. You don't have any conversations as me. You don't do stuff in my account so I can give you open access to my account and you can see everything. Now, if you want to contact any of the people, I mean, feel free to do it out of your own account. And feel free to get the contact information that you need and do it out of your own account or do it from your own phone. Just don't do it from mine as me. And, you know, I have no problem if you see everything. And that was kind of his standing deal. And that she always had the authority to just, you know, you can show up whenever you show up. I mean, as long as you're not being disruptive, I don't mind. So he thought he was being pretty open, but he was never able to get her to see anything other than what she saw. And that's just part of how it goes sometimes. But what was doing more damage was how they were interacting with each other. That for him, it's like, so I'm being accused of this, when part of a reality is we aren't having this relationship. That she's not being with me, so she's assuming, therefore, I must be with somebody else. But if we were just together sexually more often, then maybe she wouldn't feel so insecure about it, but we aren't, but she doesn't seem to be interested in fixing that. And so it ends up being like a multiple-tiered double bind for him. Now, of course, the other stuff counts too. But we must always, always, always remember that being faithful to our spouse is our relationship with our spouse. That when, historically, sometimes you hear, well, you know, he broke his vows, she broke her vows. That what we're talking about is the forsaking all others. That what we mean is, well, they had an affair, or they got divorced. But we've been talking about the vows here. Is the vow like, dearly beloved, we are gathered here today. Do you, sir, promise to not have an affair and to stay married to this woman? Do you, man, promise to not have an affair and stay married to this man? That's not the entirety of the vows. If the vows include love, honor, cherish, and you're not loving, honoring, and cherishing, you're breaking your vows. If you're not honoring one another, you're breaking your vows. If I'm not honoring my wife, I'm breaking my vows. If I am not cherishing my wife, I am breaking my vows. If we aren't having a sexual relationship that is in some way navigated to be optimally fulfilling and some balance as between the two of us, we are breaking our vows. If there isn't the affection and the romance and the dating and the connection and the intimacy that way, we are breaking our vows. If we're doing the better or worse and I'm being the worst, I am breaking my vows. The richer or poorer and I'm engaging in unwise, foolish behavior that is impoverishing our family, I'm drinking away paychecks, anything like that, I am breaking my vows. And so on and so on and so on. If I am bossing my wife around, I'm doing boss slave, I am breaking my vows. So the wedding vows are much bigger than this. If I'm going to be faithful, I need to be faithful to love. If I'm going to be faithful, I need to be faithful to honor. If I'm going to be faithful, I need to be faithful to cherish. If we're going to have the vow to obey, I need to be faithful to lead wisely. And in fact, just as a thing for both the men and the women, I have been told, we distilled it down to this vocabulary, that women crave masculine leadership, but they bristle under macho bossiness. And you realize it's the same for all of us. If we have a leader, if we have a supervisor, we have someone we report to that has authority over us in any realm, we want good leadership, not just bossiness. We want someone who's looking out for the team, not just himself. This is true for all of us. And so that was part of what several different women in different contexts have told me, that they crave masculine, true, authentic masculinity, leadership. But sometimes the closest they ever see is this macho bossiness thing, and they hate that. They want the leadership, not the bossiness. They want the masculine, not the macho. And so all of these things count. And they count immediately in real time, right when they happen. Other stuff, of course that counts. Often not in real time, and often not all of it. And so you have to take a look and realize that in this whole mix, whatever the rest of it is going to be to you, And that's kind of, more of a thing for a private discussion and for small group circles to really unpack that, because that can be emotionally sensitive. It should hopefully not even be controversial that being faithful is doing the vows for your partner. That being faithful is loving, honor, cherish, obey, having, holding, primary relationship that cleaves. And that's being faithful to your partner, or being unfaithful to your partner, as well as other stuff. So this is this part of obeying, forsaking, and the idea of faithfulness when we're talking about our wedding vows. We will continue next time with a primary focus on cleaving, and we'll also be talking about for as long as we both shall live, and a little bit more on a few other things, of course. So thank you very much. We'll see you for the next lesson.